Hi, my name is John, and today I'll be doing the full breakdown of the upcoming writing exam sample paper that was recently released and how you can best maximize your marks by doing what I'm going to show you today. Let's get into it. It is likely that if these papers earlier for a couple of years, for instance, we wouldn't be doing this breakdown. However, since it was just recently released here in December 2020, and we have the upcoming exam in March 2021, we don't have much time for students who are about to do the exam. So I think it would be very useful and beneficial for these students to have an expert or someone who is quite knowledgeable to actually help guide them and to show them a little bit about the process and how they should best tackle this upcoming question. If you did not see my previous video about my predictions regarding writing exam and what you can expect compared to what it was previously, definitely recommend you to check it out just because my predictions were quite spot on. But let's go over the writing exam and what we can expect. I'm going to first go over the entire question, then I will repeat particular lines and break those down accordingly as well. I've also seen other material and other people who have analyzed this sample question and have recommended students to actually tackle it in a certain way. However, I think that they're a little bit misled and only 70 or 80% there. I encourage you to use critical thinking when listening to people provide advice online, just with any other recommendation, just because you don't want to be following the wrong advice. I'm not saying what I recommend is the best way, but it's good to be informed with a bunch of different references to make sure. The question is, new to the area. 3 new students have just arrived in your local area. Your teacher has asked you to write an advice sheet for them, making them feel enthusiastic about coming to your school. Write an advice sheet for the new students about how to get on well in your school and local area. By reading the first line, 3 new students have just arrived in your area, you already know that the target audience that you should be writing for are these new students. If it was just one student, you could have targeted the language to the individual student. So you could have said you or a student. But now, since we know it's 3 students, it's a collective, it's a group. So you can't actually specify and say, oh, hey Matthew, come on here because XYZ, it's very exciting because there's 3 different students. And those 3 students might have differing interests and experiences. So you can't just expect that they all like the same thing. For instance, if it's a boy, girl, and a boy from different ages and different, places that they come from, they're going to like and prefer different things. But if they're one student that were overseas, for instance, an international student, then we can actually assume some things that are specific to where they're coming from. So the fact that we know that it's 3 students shows that our recommendations have to be quite broad and we have to contextualize where we assume these students come from in the first place. Therefore, when we first start writing, we can help contextualize this and frame it in the way that supports us. You don't want to assume that for the 3 students that are coming to your school or your local area, that one of them's international, one of them's local, and the other one's rural student. That's going to be very hard for you to cater to all of them at the same time, and your points will be quite weak if you do try and attempt that. Instead, make an assumption at the beginning and say, all 3 students, we already know that you're female and coming from China, visiting here temporarily, you're going to love it because of XYZ. And that's great. You set the scene and the market clearly knows what type of students that you're trying to appeal to in the first place. If you're not doing this, it can be quite chaotic and you're not going to get the most marks. Furthermore, if the students that you're trying to cater to are from overseas and they don't even know English, it's going to be a bit foolhardy to write an advice sheet for them in English because they can't even read it. So that's why it might be good for this sample paper to write about domestic students or rural students, about why it's great to come to your area specifically. This is critical so that the reader, so me or someone else or the marker, won't make their own assumptions. So if you don't actually say who the actual audience or student is, then we're going to assume that maybe they're from America or maybe they're university students, when in fact in your mind you're thinking that they're primary school students here in Sydney. We're never going to know, which is why it's important Let's make that clear from the get-go. In the next line, it states that your teacher has asked to write an advice sheet for them. This line is quite significant because it provides us with even more details than the line before. It shows us that although your teacher is asking us to write an advice sheet, that is actually a bit of a fusing, because is the key audience your teacher or the students? In this case, it's still the students, even though your teacher's asking you to do it, because your teacher's telling you to write it for the students. Please don't make this mistake. I've actually seen other people and other videos on YouTube and on other platforms recommend some different suggestions or don't even address this. However, it's critical. If the actual marker or the real audience that you're catering to is the teacher, then you have to write the conventions of a test or an assignment. So you may include your name, your class, the teacher's name, your recommendations, when you have submitted the assignment, when it was due. But if it's just a pure advice sheet for new students and not the actual teacher, then it's going to have completely different conventions, and you have to follow that accordingly. Second part of that line is making them feel enthusiastic about coming to school. This is all centered on making them feel excited. What in particular about your school or your local area should I really care about? Why should I come? Is it your history? Is it the extracurricular that is only available to your school? Is there events that are specific to your school, like the school gala day? It could be anything. However, you do have to back it up. So follow the Peel formula that I mentioned in my previous video, and I think it will actually help you structure it in a really great way. And the last sentence is write an advice sheet for the new students on how to get on well in your school and your local area. This is the crux of the question. Write an advice sheet. But what is an advice sheet? Yes, other people have actually noted that it's basically a disguised persuasive, which is true. However, it has its own conventions. Persuasive writing is, an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And for the body paragraphs, follow a structure like Peel, do a bit of a thesis and contextualize it in an introduction. Great. However, an advice sheet is a little bit different to that, and you have to follow its set parameters. For an advice sheet, they have headings and subheadings. So for this sample paper, an example of a heading that you may write is new to the area. Make it a rhetorical question, and that kind of invites the reader to read on further. The subheadings would actually be shortened versions of your body paragraph points. So if you're going to write about the history of the local area, the school's events, you might actually include as a subheading what makes us unique or school gala day. So these are the things that you can actually write. The subheadings can be anything, but just make it a little bit of a shortened version to entice the reader to read on, because you're writing an advice sheet. You want them to keep on reading and to give actionable advice and recommendations that they can actually use. Another example is if a paragraph is all about the school's history, then maybe a subheading can be lead back into the past at Wentworthville High School, or flashback and see what we have on offer. So to summarize, for every question, you have to ask yourself these key questions. What are they asking you to do? Who is the true key audience? Is it the teacher or is it the new students? You have to know that in this case, it's the 3 new students and not the teacher. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of marks. Should you have headings, subheadings, dates? Is it a letter? Is it a persuasive? Is it a narrative? What type of format are they asking you to do? Can you do Peel or another set of formula to help you structure your writing? These are great questions to help prompt you in terms of what you can write and help you maximize the marks for the upcoming selective exam. I will likely get some of my students in January to actually do this. So if you want me to share this, I could definitely can. Only if you guys are interested in, otherwise this is probably going to suffice. Anyway, that's everything from me. I'll see you guys next time. But if you have any questions, write them down below and I'd love to help you guys out.